Okay. Well, welcome back. It's a lovely fall evening for us to spend together. And I think I'm going to pick up from where I was last time, which was I started to build an ad to type everything out. And actually, no, I think first we'll go back over and review some of the main things, and then we'll go back and build this thing, now that I think about it. So just to keep reviewing, because all this stuff is over and over again, all these the elements of design and the principles of design. These are things that you're going to use over and over again, hear over and over again. So we're going to just keep reinforcing it here. Anybody have any questions from last week? You guys are all, look like you've muted pretty much on your own. Except for Kate. I think you're still. Yep, no, now you are. Perfect, thanks. And somebody else is arriving, and then we'll just start. Because it's already a couple minutes past. Great. Great. All right. So let's go ahead. Yeah. And hopefully we can go ahead and have some fun for the next couple hours. So here we go. We'll just start with a quick review of all those basic elements that we started talking about last week, and then the principles. So we good? Everybody seeing elements of design right now? It's actually, for you Apple people, if any of you are Apple people, there's the new, what is it, Mavericks system came out this week. So it's been a little bit interesting because one of the things that got updated was Keynote, which is this presentation thing, and it's been years. I think the last time it was updated was 2009, so it's had a couple of little quirks on me. So, but I think it's I think it's okay now. So I did a test run for it, so hopefully it won't be as strange. But it's my favorite program, and I'm glad that they did finally do an update to it. Okay, so let's review the email. Yeah, you like it? It's amazing so far, right? Just out of curiosity, though, are you referring to this system, to Mavericks, or are you referring to Keynote, Samantha? Sorry, I'm addressing that to her. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, it's been. I haven't even had a chance to really explore it yet. So, but um, I am very happy with them doing this. Some of these programs, it's kind of cool. All right. So the basic thing was that we sort of talked about. Yeah. Pay. Oh, really? I can't wait to look at that. I haven't even got a chance to do that. And I'm a Pages fan. I'm sorry, just so not a Microsoft Office fan. My boss tells me I'm an Apple snob. I'm trying. I thought I tried to hide it, but apparently I don't. So I'm not even going to bother to try to hide it anymore. Just because I just find it so much more difficult to use everything in those programs compared to hopefully what you'll feel when you get familiar more so with the whole Adobe Creative Suite. So um, again, the idea of this, basically to summarize from last week, was that there are some just basic, the elements of design are kind of your building blocks. And the principles of design are what you do with those building blocks. And hopefully you put them all together and we get graphic design. So that's why we're going to go ahead and review them. So first thing is, and actually, if you really want to be technical, probably the first thing is a point, but I'm not going to go back that far. But a line is made up and a path is made up of points, just so you know. So many kinds, just to summarize a couple other points about this: actual, implied, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, contour, curved, zigzag. Some of the to name a few. And again, points create lines, lines create shapes or plane and volume. Lines help to organize information. They can direct your reader's eye as to the organization of the layout. And there we go, just my little line. Shape. It's actually a two-dimensional line with no form or thickness, a closed line. So our squares, our stars, all those other things, a couple of the ones that I showed in Illustrator. They can be geometric, like I said, squares, triangles, and circles. Or they can be the organic, which is free-form shapes or natural shapes, such as a leaf. So if you see a shape of a leaf, that's considered an organic shape. I'm going to show you this, because then we're going to go to a next one, which is texture. It's tactile, meaning you can touch it, or visual surface quality. Let's go through it. I can almost guess who that would be because I think there's only one person not muted. Let's see, Sylvia. If you can mute yours, that would be great.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, see, you think I can't see you from here, right? No, I'm joking. Just a little bit of online humor. So it's anyway, texture is also the degree of roughness or smoothness in objects. Can be real, such as in a printed piece, or implied, such as in website design. And I talked about that last week by saying that like the trend seems to be either you would do a plain website with a textured logo or a textured website with a logo that's not textured, so that there's that also that contrast. And then that's that same rectangle that we just saw in the previous slide now has some texture applied to it. So hopefully it has the feeling of more brick or stone or one of those things, and real easy to do in Photoshop. Plus you're not, Photoshop I think actually comes with just like maybe I think 4 preset textures, but you can load in as many as you want. And that's a little bit tricky. You have to kind of know Photoshop to know how to do that. But if anybody wants to know about that, just let me know offline and I'll be happy to tell you. So space, it's a 2 or 3 dimensional element defined by other elements of design. Negative space is the empty space between the shapes and forms. Space can also refer to the illusion of depth. Real space is actually 3-dimensional. So this is a cube created in seconds in Illustrator. Really, really simple to do some 3D objects in there. A lot of fun to do. My favorite thing, one of my favorite things is, if you notice on here, just to give you some side stuff about design elements, you can see that it says illusion of space on this cube. You know, what that is done is I have actually mapped those words onto this cube. And mapping is great. So if anybody, does anybody remember or seen, they used to be pretty popular, I don't know how much they are anymore, but a photo cube. So you know where you put the photos on all different sizes? We could actually do that in Illustrator pretty easily, because what we would do is we would make each of those photos a symbol and just map it to the various sides that make up a cube. So just a fun thing to do. Pressure families for the holidays. We're getting to that time of year as it is, aren't we? Starting with Halloween. Can't believe it's going to be Halloween. Size refers to variations in the proportions of objects, lines, or shapes. There is a variation of sizes in objects that's either real or imagined. It's kind of a, you could use size to create some illusions. Value is the degree of light and dark in a design. It can be used with black and white or with color. Contrast is the extreme changes between values. And there, what that is that same color that I've been using as a design, actually kind of as a repetition, a repetitive element throughout this presentation has been this color. And I did that, of course, on purpose. And then this was my thing that I've showed you before in Illustrator of doing a blend. So I have that going from 10% to 100% of the same color. So you can see that we can get various shades. And that's referring to the various values. Color. Chroma, that word again, intensity and value. It's also known by hue. So to produce tints, add white. To produce shades, add black. And that's what you're looking at down there. Like I've added 50% white to that basic color, and I've added 50% black. So my basic color that I was using through this has those various values as well. So we're going to go over the principles of design, the couple that we haven't mentioned yet. Contrast, which I was just talking about that you can do that with the various values of color. And the basic purpose of contrast is to create an interest on the page to help organize your information. You can get contrast through your typeface choices, line thicknesses, colors, shapes, sizes, space, etc. So that's why we need to know the elements, and then we apply the principles. When you use contrast, do it with strength. So you don't want to contrast a sort of heavy line with a sort of heavier line, or brown text with black headlines, because that's too close. It's not enough contrast. So if the items are not exactly the same, make them very different. Repetition. So the basic purpose of repetition is to unify and to add visual interest. You can get repetition by pushing existing consistencies further. Think about adding elements whose sole purpose is to create repetition, like a distinctive font, a numbered list, page numbers, etc. Avoid repeating the element so much, though, that it becomes annoying or overwhelming. So you always got to be worried about doing too much of a good thing. Be conscious of the value of contrast. And this was the thing, I don't know if you guys remember back a couple of classes, but I showed like the website with the watches, and I like the way they did the repetition of a pattern, but yet still use different watches. So it was the pattern that was repetitive. With actually the watches were too, in a certain pattern, but it was just a clever way of using the repetition to bring attention to those watches. So balance. And that's all about ensuring that your design does not tip to one side or the other. It's kind of like the balance of weight in achieving symmetry or asymmetry. And we've gone over that a couple of times too, but I have a glossary of terms also that I'll put in that Dropbox folder. Symmetrical design is typically off-center or created with an odd or mismatched number of disparate elements. When the left and right side of the design are unequal, it is said to have an asymmetrical balance. And then we have alignment. And the basic purpose of alignment is to unify and organize the page. So you can get alignment by being conscious of where you place the elements. And again, we want to do that by eye, because that was one of the things that was one of the 20 things, really going way back now, that we talked about. That's in the beginning of the book, about those 20 things that are good to know about design. So always find something else on the page to align with, even if the two objects are physically far away from each other. No period, sorry for that. Avoid repeating the elements so much that it becomes annoying or overwhelming. And when using alignment, avoid using more than one text alignment on a page. And use centered alignment with thought, not by default, because again, that centered strikes of formality. We think of invitations, that kind of thing. But occasionally, though, these are all the rules. We sort of sometimes break the rules. I'll show you an example of that in that rebuild of the ad that we're going to go ahead and do after this. Proximity. Basic purpose to organize a proximity is to organize information. You can get it by counting the number of visual elements on the page, by counting the number of times your eye stops. If there are more than 3 to 5 items on the page, think about which separate items can be grouped together into closer proximity to become one visual unit. And try to avoid having too many separate elements on the page. And actually, I'll switch over to something in a minute just to show you some other things, some of the elements. But these are just, a lot of this stuff will definitely come into play much more, make a lot more sense when you're actually creating stuff. So this unity, I don't believe we actually mentioned, but it's all the elements on a page, a poster, a slide. They must look like they belong together. You obviously want to do that. And it can be achieved by using similar items conceptually. But you also want to break it up once in a while to grab attention or add interest. And that leads us to a similar thing, which is a term called Gestalt. I don't know if anybody's ever heard about this. My advantage in this one is that I was actually many moons ago a psych major. And and Gestalt is a psychological principle. It's sometimes considered a distinct principle of design. It's the concept that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's the tendency of humans to conceptually group things together to make a meaningful whole. When viewing designs, we apply this principle unconsciously by seeing connections and relationships among and between the elements in the design. The overall perception of Gestalt in a design is created through harmony, unity, balance, proportion, proximity, and all the other visual cues that we've been talking about. And you can use this principle to create visual connections and relationships that clarify and strengthen the overall feel and meaning of the design. So when you say the overall design works, this is the design's Gestalt. In visual design, Gestalt helps us to perceive the overall clear message of the design. And I just have this thing thrown in here because I think it's fun. Can everybody see all the different elements that make this up? It's kind of a fun piece of work. I like things with that, things hidden within that. Is this the one? Yeah. And actually, for me, the couple times, like I've always seen the woman and the dog, but I didn't always see the man that makes up his face. Can you guys see that? That there's a man making up the face? I don't know if it's too blurry. It's not a high-res version, unfortunately, of this photo. But it's pretty cool. Yeah, with a hat on, exactly. I don't know if he's got a shawl. I can't tell what that is, but the thing that makes up his like mustache. So, kind of fun. And dominance. Dominance relates to varying degrees of emphasis in design. It determines the visual weight of a composition, establishes space and perspective, and often resolves where the eye goes first when looking at a design. There are 3 stages of dominance, each relating to the weight of a particular object within a composition. So dominant, it's the object that's given the most visual weight, the element of primary emphasis that advances to the foreground in the composition, in your composition. Subdominant is the element of the secondary emphasis, the element in the middle ground of the composition, and subordinate, which is the object given the least visual weight, the element of tertiary. That comes in, again, we've talked about tertiary when we talked about colors, the color wheel. So it's a third, when you hear that term, it means like number 3. Hence, the object given the least visual weight, the element of tertiary emphasis that recedes to the background of the composition. So, summarize, dominance is essentially the same idea as contrast. Every good design has a strong and clear focal point. Um, I wish I'd thrown in one of my ads. I have one ad that has a focal point that I just think is very funny, but some people might not appreciate the humor of it. And having a clear contrast among elements, with one being clearly dominant, helps. If all items in a design are of equal weight, nothing dominant, it is difficult for the viewer to know where to begin. So, I just like this poster. But in this example, it's a good example of showing you like the trees act as the dominant element, the house and the hills are the secondary element, and the element of tertiary emphasis is the mountains. So, that are way back in the background of it. And there's a hierarchy. So a well-designed page slide has a clear starting point, helped by clear dominance, and guides the viewer through the design. So your hierarchy is, your importance can be expressed with a clear hierarchy of elements. There's going to be something you're going to want to emphasize, something you're not going to want to emphasize as much, but you're going to have to put in there. Say like maybe like you have an event somewhere and you can decide what the event name is the most emphasis, and then where it is, maybe the exact address might be something that might be lower down the hierarchy. So you separate the most important element and group those of lesser importance. All right, so let's go out of here a second and just look at some stuff here. So we have this, but let's go back over here. I just want to show you something. I've done this. And this doesn't actually, I wrote like some of the headlines and filled in the things here with this, but I actually probably did this whole thing in like 5 minutes, because once you get familiar with some of the um, tricks of the trade with InDesign, it's really, really easy to go ahead and do it. But I just wanted to go ahead and do this way so you can see a couple of different things about it, like the idea of the fact of the lines and the shapes, bringing through here. I mean, I think my picture is probably the dominant element in this. But then we got the use of like the lines here. You can see that breaks up the quote, having it stand out. I took the colors, I chose the colors really for from the photo itself. So this is the same couple here in this thing through here. And then, use shapes, like the shape here on the bottom, have it just a little bit angled. Angled up here, again, with this, where it says that there's a round to I made the corners of the picture, rounded, just to show you that going through, used a little bit, I like pink as the highlight color with the yellow and blue, and that was just strictly because I just like pink. With that, it could probably been a variety of other colors with it, but so you can see that, and it's really cool because you can do, let's just zoom in here. It's kind of fun. You can do these text wraps. So that's what's happening here. This photo is, going through it. I think this is a little too close here. So you start to play with it. So I didn't, I haven't done like anything to it, like really go ahead and look. This is just basically the layout. And it should, well, we won't worry about that. But anyway, just wanted to show you about that we've just used some of the things on there. So let's go back here. I don't need to save it. This is actually where we got to last week. It was just I had built this shape in Illustrator. Let's just go ahead in here. And I combined it, the rounded rectangle with a regular rectangle and did a combination of the shapes. It's really easy. I showed you the tool. There's a combination tool in Illustrator that hopefully you'll learn more about in the next, although I believe you guys go to InDesign after this. So here's a head start to that too as well. So anyway, that's what that is. But the cool thing is what I had done is I had created it in Illustrator and I just copied and pasted it into here. Like I didn't, it's very easy to do that within the thing. I could take the same shape here now, I can copy it and I can go ahead and paste it into Photoshop. No problem as well. So I don't have to like go ahead and save it as a shape. Do you know what I mean? Like save it and then, reopen it within the thing. You can just copy and paste among that. They just work really, really well together, all the different things right now. So it's kind of fun. Kind of fun. Anyway, this is where we were, which was trying to add a little bit different to this. I mean, this is very, very rectangular. I don't think it's really actually bad. And this was just supposed to be a museum piece, like a card that they gave out that has, information just about this exhibit being there. And they've given us this one piece of art. This is all hypothetical, which is this statue over there. And made this transparent so that, we can still see the picture but underneath it, not, lose some of it. Centered text, centered all the way through here as well. No other visual like clues though to any differentiation in the text there. So we're going to try to, fix that a bit. And we used, we might stay with that. We'll probably stay with the fonts. So we have one font here. Oh, by the way, this is just to show you through this, and I didn't do it on here. But what I like to do is keep, InDesign will also just build everything. Like if we go ahead and put another element on this page, let's just go ahead and put a picture box. It's automatically going to put everything on the same layer. It kind of works the same way. So does Illustrator works this way as well. Whereas Photoshop will keep doing new layers for each of these different things. So I like to actually separate things out. I find it much easier to work that way, to put like, do a layer called images, do a layer called text, do a layer called background. And that way it's much, and I name them. So that way it's much easier when I come back to this to manipulate something, instead of having everything all there. It's still, fairly easy to get to, but yet not. See, I'm clicking and it's kind of hard for me to get to this picture, what I'm doing here. It keeps clicking on this other thing. I'm going to do it. But here's a clue. It's easier if you hold down the command key for Apple people or the control key for PC people and just click. It's much easier to go ahead and get to what you want. What that lets you do is cycle through because there is a hierarchy of the way these things have been placed on the page. So there's an order. So this statue is like the very bottom thing here, and you can tell that because it's right here in this list of things, and this goes from bottom item to top, and that's the way Illustrator will be as well. So just keep that in mind for when you're going ahead and doing those classes. All right, so the next thing that I want to do here is, like I said, so I went here and we started building it. Hold on, getting ahead of myself here. Some of it I had to pre-do because for time, the sake of time, you can't watch me sort of really, do every little thing, but I will tell you what I've done. So, like I said, created this little rounded thing just to give, maybe a little bit different instead of just staying with the rectangle shape here. That was in the original. And now what I would like to do is do this, is have him be by itself. So we're going to go ahead over here. I'm going to bring it to you actually. So I just got it ready in Photoshop. And I'll show you just a couple of things as well. This is actually a fairly easy thing to get off of the background, and it's just such an interesting piece by itself. I probably would want to do that. Also, the color in that I used back here, let's just go back over here. This taupe was from the idea of the sampling thing, and I showed you that as a quick trip, but it's worth repeating again. This is the eyedropper tool, and it samples colors. So we can click on the eyedropper tool, we can open up our swatches, and that the swatches will always look like all the different programs, a bunch of little squares together. And you can choose to make this bigger if you're, somebody who needs to. You can actually go ahead and say large thumbnail so you can see these colors better. And watch over here, this little black box here, when I go ahead and click on any of these, it's going ahead and it's literally, the eyedropper is picking up those colors, but I'm not just limited to that. So I can click and hold anywhere on here, and you can see if I click over here, I have the browns. You can see I'm getting the various tints within this. So this might, for example, be something that I would want to do is like pick one of these colors, go out to cooler, which we've talked about, or use cooler within here, which was here. Let's go ahead and open it. So I could go ahead with this color. Hold on, I'm going to click over here and say OK. And we'll make it a base color. And well, anyway, let's try it this way then. I'll go ahead and copy this number, which is the hexadecimal number. It's what you use for web. Just to keep telling you what you do. I'm going to say OK. And we'll set that as the base color. And we can go ahead and say complementary. And then we'll get that interesting set of complementary colors. Not the most exciting that I've seen. Ah, because it changed it on me too. Okay, let's try this again. I don't understand why I'm doing it. Maybe it's this one that has to be that stupid. Okay, apparently it's very picky about that. So where it says base color, I just change it to that. And those would be the complementary colors to that particular one. You can also go ahead and it can do the shades. So this is where all that other thing that we've talked about color theory comes back into play. And that can come in handy as well, having the various shades. So anyway, that's where I got that color from. So I just want to let you know that. Went ahead and did that ahead of time too for the sake of time. And this is one of those things that we could probably do, and I've showed you this before, the magic wand tool, when we, the guy with the hoodie that I kept using. And I'm repetitive with those things for a reason, so I hope that it stays with you guys going through. So that's why I do that. You can see though, I don't love using this tool here, and we could probably play with it and blah 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 and try to get to, fairly decent. But because there are some similar shades, that's why it's doing this, and it would be kind of difficult to use this magic wand tool for selection. I'm going to say Command D or Control D for PC people to deselect that. And I'll show you there's another thing called the quick selection tool. And what that lets you do is sort of draw and you click and hold. And you can see I'm getting a better thing here. Of course, it would be better if we zoom out. So let's go ahead and do that. But even then, it's starting to get, yeah. All right, pretty decent, right? So that's kind of a fun thing to do too. And now let's just zoom in on it a bit again. And I'm going to go ahead, and what I really want is actually the inverse of him. So I could probably go ahead and do that, and I can save him as a PNG file. But in this case, because I am going to be using him in a printed piece, I can't use a PNG file in a printed piece. PNG files are, we talked about this when we talked about image formats. They're good for transparency. They're great for web, but you cannot use them in print. And right now I'm working on a piece in InDesign that's going to be print, so that wouldn't be my choice of way to do this. But I could go ahead and say select inverse because I just want to show you the difference. And I'm going to go ahead and do a new document. And actually, this is interesting. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to say Command N. And what it will do is it'll automatically give me a document that this would fit in. You don't have to worry about like guessing the size of something with that. So that's just a quick thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say new, and I'm going to double the width because I want to show you two of them. And actually, I'll just make it even bigger. Say OK. So we're going to go ahead. I'm pressing D to get the default colors. I'm going to go ahead and change my background to black, I think. So I just want you to be able to see all the mixed pixels. You can hopefully see that it's kind of fuzzy, right? It's not an ideal thing to do a selection like that because we kind of get this whole fuzzy little artifacting thing happening around the photo here. So I'd like to do something a little bit more precise this time around. So what I've done ahead of time, because you don't need to sit here and watch me do this, and this will be something that you learn, but what I did is I used the pen tool to go ahead and create a path around this. And let's go ahead and use this so you can see. So see all these things? These are called, when there's curves here, these are Bezier curves. And what I've done is literally used the pen tool and drawn a path around this. So now I just want to show you also that if I hold down my command key, it would be a control key for PC people, and clicked on this path, I now have a selection. And I'm going to say copy, and I'm just going to go back over to this other new one. At least I thought I had it there. Did I take it out of here? That's weird. Okay. Let's go in on it. So, again, still not perfect because I was doing this in area 2, but it's, hopefully see that there's a little bit smoother thing happening in here. So when you want it to be a much more precise selection, the pen tool might be the way to go. And also, for selecting something out of it. I had shown the thing where there was the pictures of the lawyers on the desk, and they had this busy background going on, and it wasn't the easiest path to do, but because especially with people with hair, there's kind of like tricks for that. So I kind of go back and forth with a couple of different methods for doing this. But in any case, let's say now we've gotten this guy. He is, and that was just for showing you. Let me escape from that. Go head over here, back to this one. And I went ahead and saved this path, and I called it Statue 2. And what you want to do when you do a when you're working with this pen tool and you're saving a path, then you need to do something like this, which is a clipping path. So you just go ahead and you go to this menu here, which has a pull down of different things, and you choose clipping path. And I've chosen path statue 2 because that's the path I want. This has to do with printing. It's really not important what number goes there. Some people do put something. Sometimes I won't even bother. So I just want to let you know that. But I'm going to say OK now. And I'm going to say save as. And it's off screen, but for you guys, but I'm going to save as, and I can do this as a TIFF or as a EPS because that is what those two formats support a clipping path. If I do it as a JPEG, it's actually probably just going to come out as the whole thing with the brown background still, which I don't want. So in this case, I'm going to say TIFF for statue, and I'm going to go ahead and save it somewhere, which you can't see, but it's not very exciting anyway. I'm just going to save it to a folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call it the after statue, solo statue. So we'll know what to look for and say OK. And again, when I do that, I just save whatever the default saving settings are for the TIFF is what I've done there. I'm going to go back over to InDesign, and this is one of my favorite shortcuts. And actually, let's move this out of the way so I could not get you confused. Okay, so now I'm back in InDesign. You can tell I got the little pink ID thing happening over there because sometimes they start to look the same. Again, this is my workspace is Essentials, and at any time I can go ahead and say Reset Essentials, so it puts everything back in its neat little thing. It's like a magic genie automatically cleaning up my workspace, my work area here. And we can actually do here also, I could say application frames so that we can go ahead and do that. And now it's just put a bunch of these things separate, so let's just get rid of it. And that's fine. I'll just make it a little bit bigger, hide stuff behind it. Okay. So anyway, here's my favorite, one of my favorite things for InDesign. It's a favorite shortcut because I use it all the time. And I can do a couple of different things here. I can decide, like right here, because again, we'll just keep this in mind because we're cheating, but that's what I'm going for here. So I could go ahead and just go ahead and draw a picture box. And these boxes here, this rectangle, actually they're frames, and they can be used for text as well as images. It just, it's a very adaptable program, and it'll adapt to whatever it is that you're going to put in there. So let's go ahead and place our image in this box. So I'm going to do Command D, Control D for people, and I'm going to go define solo statue. There it is. That's what I call it, and then I have it gone in there. And you can see there's no brown background because when I saved it as a clipping path, that's what I was doing. Is what I had drawn, that path around it, that's all I wanted. That's what I said to Photoshop. Just give me the path. I don't want the background. And now there are a bunch of things here, and you can actually do this a couple of different ways too, which is, the frame. And we could go ahead here, but I like to tell people about this first because these are the pictures. And if you hover over it, see, we can say fill frame proportionally, fit content proportionally. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you can see that now it's taken that, so now we can see the whole image, but it stays within that set frame size that I wanted. And there are various other ones. You can center the content. Looks like it already is. Fit frame to content if it happened to have had a bigger one than that. So various things to do with that. And let's just move on. So anyway, the point of this is just the idea of why I'm trying to show you also just the fact that, why would I go to one program versus another? Because a lot of people have also asked me throughout my courses of teaching this, why do I need to have the whole entire Creative Suite? And if I had to just get one program, what would it be? And that's a really tough one for me to answer because I use these three constantly together. So, I mean, they work well for most of my projects, whether or not it be some stuff that's related to web. One or the other is going to be Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So Illustrator is where I do all the vector things, and Photoshop is where I do anything with photo treatments, and InDesign to me is where it all comes together. Because like I was showing you in that last thing, when I tell you that seriously that only took me like 10 minutes to put together, I'm serious because I can just go ahead and do some really cool things with InDesign, and I'll just show you that real quick. Right, we can go ahead and do a new document. And I can do this frame tool, see, it says rectangle frame. If I go ahead and click and hold and drag out here, you can see that? See how I got a rectangle thing happening? If I add arrow keys, what I'm doing, my up arrow key, it's giving me now, it's making this into 3 rows of something. If I go ahead and use the right arrow key, you can see I'm getting boxes here. And I can end up playing with these afterwards. But the point is that I can go ahead and do this pretty quickly. I can go ahead and do Command D. Let's go just out to my desktop. And I'll just go in here and just pick a couple of these. I don't want to do all of them, but I'm just holding down my command key so it lets me just selectively pick whichever ones I want from here. Lipstick should be good. Say open. You can see what happens here is it loads them up in here. And I could just go wham, wham, bam, and just go ahead and place these pretty quickly. I can change it. So again, I can shift click to select them. Say fit content proportionally. I can also say fill frame proportionally, read that, and we can just where we want them. So I'm just trying to say, like, you can do some layouts pretty quickly with this thing. So that's just my point of that. And yes, I can do a layout in Photoshop, and yes, I can do one in Illustrator as well, but it won't be as easy. So let's deal with that. And then we would go ahead, and then we go back to the other, because we got a lot to cover. But then I just wanted to show you. So here's this one now. And yes, did center it going through. And this was fun. This is like, kind of like the table of contents. It's one way to go with it, just as something different. You can see though now I have some of the text bolded, some of the text lighter, so I can add some contrast. I have these grouped together because they go together, the two names, the proximity thing. And then this was another way. And then when I was talking about breaking the rules, about like the idea of like it says don't use more than one alignment. Well, here we have center alignment with this piece here and this piece here, but it's kind of, I think, visually interesting to do this, which is have these guys all aligned to the right and these guys align all the way to the left, and it just, I mean, again, this comes to personal preference, so you may or may not like it, but I just thought it was kind of cool. It's kind of a cool way to go with it, and it's definitely using various alignment. Does anybody have any questions about this, or would like me to show them something again that they might have missed? Or you can replay this. That's what the good thing is about recording it. So hopefully that's helping you guys out with somewhat, having these things recorded, besides for people who miss classes. So okay, we're going to go into more fun things now because we're going to talk about branding and logos, and I'm going to show you a really cool website that actually shows the whole evolution and thought process that went into the development of a logo that I thought was really a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to showing you that. So let's get going on about that. And make sure I get back to the right thing of this. There it is. Got a lot of stuff happening here, but we're good. Okay. So 3 terms. So these are 3 concepts that are all related to one another and often confused. But very, very important, very, very important for us to discuss. We're going to go over them. So brand, identity, and logo. Identity design for any organization, that's like more than 3 people is the act of, diplomat. The idea, actually, sorry, designing it for any organization containing more than 3 people is the act of like diplomatically negotiating personal egos and tastes and aspirations of various invested individuals against their business needs, their preformed expectations, and the constraints of the marketplace. A complicated logo design, one that might stand alone, let's say, say as a design class project, may simply, be too busy out of context in a real world kind of context. So it's, how do these three go together? And that's what I'm hoping that I'll be able to explain to you. Good branding allows for a logo or identity system to gain resonance and recognition over time in connection with materials that are capable of being far more expressive than logos. So, what I want you to think about is, because I'm hoping that everybody's familiar with this, which is just the Nike logo. Hopefully, everybody knows that, the swoosh. The only reason I say that is really you can't assume in life that, you never know, somebody might come from somewhere else and not, have that familiarity. But I think most people do, and that's why I like to talk about Nike. And we're going to show it a couple of times in this. So, really, it's evolved over time into its current form, and it became a powerful symbol really because of its effective use in advertising campaigns. So in its purest form, like say the swoosh, that's what it's called. Plus, I think because I like saying that, that's why I choose it. Appeared alone in design, like say people were, critiquing it, and I'll show you a place where you can do that as well. But if somebody just put the swoosh out there, right, without any context, might not be that all that impressed, with it. Most likely you would think, maybe it's too thin, too weak, too pointy looking. It looks like a check mark. It's not really conveying motion, nothing, but logos become iconic over time, through their use and in combination with an overall perception of a brand. And they shouldn't be judged purely as form and out of context as they are on design blogs a lot, because it takes a period of time for a logo to really establish itself in the marketplace, just as it takes like a magazine a year or so to establish its personality. So let's see. So that this was cool. It's a kind of a neat graphic that was put together by a brand consultant named Alina Wheeler, and it's a phased process for researching, clarifying, and implementing a brand strategy. So I threw it in here so that when we do the PDF thing, if that's true, yeah, that's the other interesting thing about that. And I'm going to go into a little bit about that. Brings up a good point. When he was saying that the logo sold for like $25 or something, it could possibly have. And people also like a lot of a question that comes up a lot is like, how much should I charge for a logo? It's obviously that would be a frequently asked question in the graphic design business, and it really I can't really answer that easily because every company, every situation, there's different needs and expectations. But you do have to take like a number of things into consideration when you design a logo, brand, and identity, such as how many concepts need to be presented, how many revisions will be needed, how much research is required, because as we're going to talk about, that's a really important thing. How big this business is and so on, because obviously Nike, huge, so a lot of money to be made. There's a lot to be said with how much of a how much, if you think about it, really, I mean, the process with, especially if it's a corporation like Nike and there's so many personalities involved, can you imagine like how many people you have to go through and like just, to get something that everybody agrees on and that kind of thing? I mean, it's a lot more work than people think, and that's really part of it. It's the fact that as a graphic designer, you're also the diplomat, the negotiator, um, all those different things to try to get this, the process of creating this logo done as smooth as possible. So there are stories about that, and there were also things that say like a design student could do a better job. It's for like $25, versus, somebody else who spent that. But people don't see all the work that goes on behind the scenes. So it's really not fair to judge something, like that. But I would be very, very sad if she did because it's a pretty good thing done. I'm going to have to look that up because now I am curious about that. So anyway, if you are interested in, if this thing intrigues you, there's also her book. She does, designing brand identity, essential guide for the whole branding team. Easy to follow steps. worthwhile advice. Following this process, it's not going to guarantee branding success, but ignoring it will probably lead to some muddled identity program that confuses consumers and employees. So it's kind of a cool thing here. And we'll go into this a little bit more. So like I said, I just have that up there so that you guys can use that as a reference. But let's go over more detail of what I mean by each of these things individually so that we can understand the concepts, hopefully. So, what is a brand? What are we talking about when we're talking about brands or branding? Either term. We're referring to the perceived image and the subsequent emotional response to a company, its products, its services. It also represents the conversation that customers are having with each other about the company and how that spreads. There is a direct marketer expert and author named Seth Godin, and he describes it as a brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. If the consumer, whether it's a business, a buyer, a voter, or a donor, doesn't pay a premium, make a selection, or spread the word, then no brand value exists for that consumer. The AMA definition defines branding as a name, term, sign, symbol, design, or a combination of these things intended to identify the goods and services of one seller or group of sellers and to differentiate them from those of other sellers. So let's say, right, that there are 3 bicycle stores near each other in your neighborhood. You're ready to buy a bicycle. So why are you going to go into one store over the other 2? What differentiates that store that you're going to go into from the other 2? Branding is creating a look that represents a unique delivery of what a product or a service is. It's not just, a logo, but an entire look, an entire package. So the website will have the look, letters and invoices will have that look, shopping bags will have that look if that's the case, with the particular item. Facebook will have the look. You get the idea. Branding, it's your reputation, it's what's behind the logo. So the perceived emotional corporate image as a whole, it's customer focused, consistent look and feel that succinctly tells the world who you are, why they should do business with you. It's the space you want to occupy in your customers' minds so when they think of your organization, they think of your product and reputation at the same time. So, things to think about when you're creating a brand. Who is the company? What is their product? What is unique about the product or organization? What benefit does the product have? It's a biggie. Why should the public care that they exist? I'm sorry, I pressed thing quickly, but it's identity. So an identity describes the visual devices used to represent the company. So identity systems are a visual components package that's paired with style guidelines, and we're going to need to look at a style guide, and used as a framework to ensure the corporate image is cohesive and consistent. So some of the visual devices that leverage the brand elements and style guidelines are as follows. Stationery, marketing collateral, packaging, signage, messaging, digital products, the list goes on, but that's the idea, and I'll show you after this an example of what I'm talking about. But it's the visual aspects that form part of the overall brand. One major role is in the brand or corporate image of a company is its identity. It's made up of various visual devices, like I said, these things that I mentioned before, and these are usually assembled within a set of guidelines. So that's why I'm saying I want to show you a style guide. I know I did download one. I'll have to see if I hopefully have it handy so we can go back and look at it if we have some time. Everybody has one. Say, can't remember which one I downloaded, but if you were going to be doing some kind of campaign, you were going to be using, say, Walmart's logo or something, there would be very, very strict rules about what you would be able to do with that logo. And it would all be, outlined in a style guide. So everything about an identity, everything should support the brand as a whole. And when I'm hoping this next thing you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, this is not filled out. This is actually just something that you could actually get from stock photography. It represents, all like maybe a whole bunch of different possible things, as you can see there, right? But they all have that same look. That's the identity. So it's all that thing to support it. And that leads us to the next thing, the one that everybody thinks is fun, or at least a lot of people do. After a logo becomes familiar, does it function the way it's intended to do? So just as we, learn people's names, right, to identify them, we need that same association with a logo in order to categorize it as successful. And the logo identifies, a business, a corporation, a company, or product. It's in its simplest form. So to understand what a logo is, you first need to understand what it's for. And it's for identification. So it's not an identity, but it's for identification. It identifies a company or product via the use of a mark, a flag, symbol, or signature, like the swoosh. And they're there to identify. And I meant to identify. You can see that's the other reason, by the way. Here, this is a good thing. I kind of like when I make mistakes so I can point it out and show you like how spell check would not have worked in this case, right? Because identity is a word, but it's not the right word here, right? Logos are there to identify, not to explain. So in a nutshell, what a logo means is more important than what it looks like. And again, think of logos like people. We prefer to be called by our names and not a description about what we look like. In the same way, a logo should not literally describe what the business does, but rather identify the business in a way that is recognizable and memorable. And so now we'll just see a couple of fun things about logos, because it is a big part of this whole design process and people are always very interested in it. So here's a couple of things here's 5 principles of effective logo design. And that's that, stay with. And this is done by, here's another great resource if you are out there. I've mentioned B&A before and after, a lot of stuff from them, great, great stuff. Another great resource to think about is, or to check out is Smashing Magazine if you've never heard of them. I believe it's a British import, but they do just some great, great stuff. You can learn some awesome things. And this is from them, the 5 principles of effective logo design. So simplicity makes a logo design easily recognizable, versatile, memorable. Good logos feature something unexpected or unique without being overdrawn. And I'm, overdrawn, use that in quotes, even though you can't see me, so I have to tell you that I'm saying overdrawn in quotes. Memorable, following closely on this principle of simplicity is that of memorability, right? An effective logo design should be memorable, which is achieved by keeping it simple yet appropriate. Timeless, an effective logo should be timeless. Will yours stand the test of time? Will it still be effective in 10, 20, or 50 years? I'm going to show you in a subsequent slide some enduring logos, some evolution of some logos, because I find it all very, very, very fascinating, and also still worthwhile from a learning point of view. Versatile. An effective logo works across a variety of media and applications. Um, so because of that, what program should you guys use to create a logo? I'll give you a hint because it should be very cool, right? There you go. Thank you, Samantha. It's vector. So you want to ensure that you can have this thing scaled in any size. So again, what I brought up before, whether or not we put it in a brochure that's printed, whether or not we put it blown up on a billboard, we want that same kind of clarity. We're only going to get that with a vector program. I'm going to show you something in here too, though, about what I was talking about, but we'll get to that. About how there are certain things that you can do some Photoshop effects in Illustrator, but it doesn't translate very well. It's no longer a vector format, it's a raster format. And I have something that I put within this presentation on purpose to show you what I mean by that, what can happen in the case of using a drop shadow within Illustrator, which a lot of people like to do, and appropriate. Last thing is appropriate, how you position the logo. It should be appropriate for its intended audience. We're going to talk about that. So, for example, a childlike font and color scheme, and let's, here we go. Let's look at some of them. There's our simple, memorable, timeless. This is actually uh, this American Airlines. They had the same logo for 45 years. They refuse to change. This is Helvetica, by the way. The A's are Helvetica, just to bring that up again. And there's the World of Wildlife, which is done in vector, so we go through. But this Toys R Us, right? This childlike font obviously works for Toys R Us, but you wouldn't want to do the same kind of thing, obviously, for a law firm, which has a much more serious, manner to it. So the logo needs to be more serious as well. These logos, which are very, very clear, if anybody does ever need to, and it's hard to, there are, restrictions and they're only can be used in a certain way, but the reason mine are so clear is what you are looking at here are the vector formats of these logos, which wouldn't really ordinarily be an easy thing to get because if you were going to say if I would just copy them off of online just for the sake of this, certainly not because it would be legal, because it would not be legal for me to copy any of these things and use them um, as we discussed earlier. So I'd just like to bring that point up again, tie everything together. But there's a thing called Brands of the World. And if you go to brandsoftheworld.com, you can find pretty much logos for almost everything. Certainly these guys. These were all from Brands of the World, so you can see they're pretty crisp, clean logos. Versus if I had copied them off the web, they would be a lot more fuzzy, like I was showing you, and I mean fuzzy, like when I had taken that statue and blown it up. So that, by the way, is what American Airlines changed to. So this is what I was saying about the whole, history of a logo and that kind of thing, because it's very, very interesting to me, the whole evolution of these things. Did that just change? Because I could swear I had shell, right? So let me just see. We'll go backwards. There we go. I'm not sure what happened there going through. Because I wanted to talk about shell first. Because you can see, look at this, right? There's 1909, what it started out as, and then word changed in through that. So, and the reason that I want to talk about it a little bit more is because it ties in a lot of the concepts that we've already been discussing as well. So, since first appearing in the early 1900s, the shell logo has moved from a realistic rendering of a pecten, that's what it's called, or a scallop shell, to today's bold shape with distinctive colors, which you can see in the 1999 version there. Both the word shell and the pectin symbol may have been suggested to Marcus Samuel and Company, the original founders, by another interested party. And it was because there was, at the time, in California, red and yellow. There was a large Hispanic population in California, so red and yellow were the the colors of the Spain. So, and since many early Californians were that, they say that like that was perhaps that. You know, hopefully, by doing that, the Spanish color was hoped like an emotional bond would be created. And an alternative idea was, though, also that there was another person named, Graham that I started to tell you about. He was of Scottish, and he suggested using red and yellow as they formed the basis for the Royal Standard of Scotland. So, in the days before the fax machine and the internet, many logos included subtle details that would become blurred at small sizes. So, from the 1950s onward, the icon became more and more simplified, improving recognition and memorability. So, the 1971 logo, really, which is still used, was designed by a man named Raymond Loewy, who also, by the way, created the logos for BP and Exxon. So, I guess this is his thing. He's in this whole gas thing, so if you want to look him up. And anyway, this logo has become so recognizable that it often appears without the company's name, right, to identify it. And that's an important thing. The focus on the symbol in isolation can be made when combined with a huge marketing budget. So think Nike Swish and McDonald's Golden Arches and Starbucks Mermaid, Target's Randall. Just you can see that there's just evolution into simplicity. And I have a couple of other examples of that, as you can see when I jumped ahead to Pepsi, what the evolution of that was. But I thought this was an interesting thing too, though. There's another reason, though, that supposedly the shell was dropped from the logo, and that was back in the 90s. In the 1990s, where there was actually the Bosnian War, and clever photographers would actually take photos of the logo with the S cleverly like blocked out, so by trees or whatever. And I think you know what four letters are left if we take out the S, and why they might not be very happy, as a company that people, these photographers were doing that, and the association with war, not a really, really positive thing. So that was just kind of a interesting story about that. So the other main point I want to bring out about the evolution of the logo is that sometimes the logo of a brand overpowers its name by becoming its identity. The journey of a brand towards greatness and widespread acclamation starts with a logo having their company name embedded in it to help customers identify their products, right, better. But with the transformation of the company into a brand, then they tend to omit their names out of the logos. And then only the illustration in it serves as the symbol for their recognition. So I'm going to scroll through the couple of other examples of this so you can just see, other examples of what happened here. So you can, if I'm not crazy on the thing here, let's try this again. Hopefully I didn't go back too much. I did. All right, let's just zip through this. Zip, 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 come on. See if it changes. There we go. So you can see the evolution of Pepsi started out with its name. Now it's pretty identifiable for this. It's really interesting. There's a pool, this is just a side thing, but there's a pool company called Leslie's Pools. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. But whenever I see their logo, I always think of Pepsi because to me it looks like the Pepsi logo, and it's kind of interesting that that's always what comes to mind for me when I see that logo. So this is interesting. Talk about not being simple. Look at the evolution of Mercedes, right? It's gone through this whole thing. I mean, the 1909 one was fairly simple, but then they kind of went through this more elaborate phase, I guess, until they kind of went to the current logo, which I just think is kind of pretty cool in itself. And then we have, good old Starbucks. So there's the evolution of that from 1971. 1987, 1992 even, we're still having the name in it, but, currently we don't need the name in that. And then, of course, Nike. Here's the evolution of Nike. So interesting if that's the way it was at first, where they kind of have the swoosh going through it. I don't particularly remember that, but the other ones I do. So there are many ways, to start designing a logo, but most oftentimes you'll see that the best way, and even for people who can't draw, because I have actually done a couple of logos myself, and I think I mentioned this once or twice that, I could barely draw a stick figure, but I could at least sketch out the idea of what I want before I go through it. Probably couldn't do it as good a detail as this right here. Does anybody know already from this? Can anybody guess what this was the sketching for? What this became? Very good. Yep, that's exactly it. Probably if I show you this, just because I want to show you the evolution of the drawing, you can start to see that a little bit more. Yep. So it's, you begin really by sketching out like dozens, if not hundreds, of iterations of a logo on paper. And the process of getting concepts down on paper and then iterating on those ideas can unlock new directions to explore. And you can just see that once you start doing that, your mind will start going in different ways and getting it to, so that you get to the solutions you probably wouldn't normally have arrived at when you start, if you say started this process on the computer. Anyway, after that, you selected your best sketch concept, then you would start creating them digitally. So anyway, now we have some more details into play, and then this Firefox logo is created by Martin. I can't. This one's Martin Rivjum. Anyway, from Bold Graphic, and the art direction is actually by somebody named Wolf Holland. So it was more than one person working on the creation of this logo. Now this is the one that I was saying to you that I want to show that I did it on purpose. This is a vector format of this logo, but you can see it has the white circle and it's around the drop shadow. And this is what tends to happen in Illustrator when you use what we call a raster effect. So it's a common thing in Photoshop a lot of times, and maybe even overused, to use the drop shadow. You can do a drop shadow in Illustrator, but when you do it, it becomes a raster thing. So this is no longer, I mean, we could blow this thing up, but it's still going to have that white circle. So just something to keep in mind with that. And there probably are ways to treat this, but a little too complex for us to go into here. So just want to show you that. All right, now let's go to the really cool thing. Let's just get out of here for a second. I have this queued up, so we don't have to wait. I thought this was fun. There we go. Okay. This is pretty cool. And probably part of it is, at this ocean. So there is a wonderful place in Central Park in New York called Tavern on the Green. Fairly famous thing. I think it's used a lot in movies. Pretty well known. And this will show you here. It's great. So I really just thought it was worth taking a moment or two to show that these two people, and again, I'll probably destroy their names, but let's just call them Jim and David. And they wanted a logo that felt contemporary while still referencing the restaurant's storied past. So this is they go through this, and I'll do this pretty quickly because I'll just if you're interested, I'll be happy to send you the link. But it goes through how they the thought process that went into it, and that's what I think is quite fascinating about this whole thing. So why did they want sheep? The sheep were actually, here we go. It was originally built, Tavern on the Green was originally built as a sheepfold. So the sheep were actually held there at night and let out on the sheep meadow during the day to graze and mow the lawn. So I guess, that's where they've done their research. They found this out. We're going to talk about research a little bit more. And so that's why they went with that. So here's, one of them. And then they decided, this isn't playful enough, but they wanted to keep the woodcut feel, but wasn't elegant enough. It was too rustic. So just talked about using the T as a kind of watermark that would have many different applications, but this seemed too taverny. So it's interesting because they all have a different feel, right? Too much of a brand. Look like you could see this as a stamp. They decided the problem with the ram is that the horns become too much of a strong element. Shield got incorporated. There was sort of this royalty and respectable family history that the shield evoked. So there's reasoning behind. That's what I'm trying to show you. There's a reasoning. They're not just like grabbing these, elements out of space. There's a reason why they're choosing these particular elements and these particular designs. So again, they're trying to acknowledge history with the crest here and the animals. And I like this. A lot of times we were just like, you know what? No way. We had issue with this typeface. It does not feel right. I'm not particularly fond of this typeface personally either. So you can see why they kind of rejected that. It's kind of intense. So it says we were always struggling with how to incorporate the name with the design elements. So they're still not, they're having problems with that. This one had more of like, right? It has a more nouveau feel. Horseshoe was in the early logo, so they tried that. Just gonna skip over quickly so we can do other stuff. I love that Tavern on the Green was within the logo and the use of the sheep was much more playful. And this is when they started to realize that what they wanted the sheep to be alive, they wanted movement in the logo as opposed to a stagnant image, which is another conscious thing, and that's giving that illusion of movement. So this is what they're starting to have here. They have like the sheep going through it. This felt too circusy. Yeah, it does look kind of circusy. A little too dark. Didn't say restaurant. That's another good point. You kind of want to make it relatable to what it is. Stars, it says here, we started to feel the texture, right? The movement, the flow. And there's like they they started looking for a bunch of sheeps, and we've talked about this before where everybody was looking for the pie. Um, there are plenty of images of sheep out there, but it's that finding that right one that can take so much time, finding that right image. And then this is the final design that they went in on. Um, Certainly isn't simple, but apparently it's beautiful and modern and clean. But it's a great thing, I thought, because it does show you the whole thought process. If you don't get a chance to see that, hopefully you got a chance to see inside somewhere. Because nobody really knows a lot of times where to start with when it comes to creating these kind of things like brand and identity and logo, and yet they're so important. But like, what do you do? You know? All right. So how do we go about creating a brand identity? So we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about research a little bit, design brief, logo, style guidelines. So research. This phase should be as thorough as needed. depending on the depth of research and the size of the company. It's the most crucial part, really, of your overall process, and it should result in a design brief that guides the rest of the project. And we'll go over in detail about a design brief because it's a very important thing to work from. So here's a list of foundational questions and key dynamics. I don't have it on here, but I don't have them actually written out, but I'm going to tell you about. But they're key things to explore and document through qualitative and quantitative. Those are two research terms. And probably like, ugh, you're like, zoning out. It's like, oh my God, I want to do the fun stuff. But to get to the fun stuff, to be able to really be good at the fun stuff, you have to go do some of this, unfortunately, some of this back stuff. And one of the most important things you can do is learn about this company. So here are the things you got to think about, right? Like, how is the brand perceived against competitors in the market for products and services you're looking to provide? What is the positioning statement of the brand? Answer the what, how, to whom, where, why, and when questions. What is the heritage of the product type and the origins of its ingredients? How's it made? What's the fabrication process? Who is your audience? You're not designing for everybody. Are they digitally savvy? Where will your products, services have contact with them? How do you want that contact experience to make them feel? Take action and think about, your brand. What values and beliefs should the brand have about the business and its mission in the world? If the brand was a person, what would its personality be? How would it look? How would it act? How would it, how would it speak? What benefits do you want customers to associate with this brand? What is the vision of the brand that you want to create? Other brand image concerns, market awareness, emotional associations, value to the consumer, brand perception versus consumer behavior, changes um, changes just in the brand consumer relationship over time. Like, what do you foresee happening over time? Like some of those other ones that stood the test of time throughout the years. The more you know, the easier your project will be, right? Like, for example, you really wouldn't want to use plastic bottles, right? Plastic bottles in a design for someone who only sells organic materials, who's going to be much more environmentally conscious. They would probably not be very happy, right? So you would need to know that kind of background about them. So that's why the more you know, the better you're going to be. The more you know about everything, and I know you can't learn everything, but I'm just saying, when I say the more you know about everything, I mean just try to be well-rounded in what it is you know about. So here's an example that I've thrown in here that you guys can look at closer on your time too. I'll make it into the PDF as well as the recording of this session, like I've done for the others, which I put in. I don't think I have last week's, but which will be in the Dropbox folder. So this is, like I said, an example. Like, you can see, look how much stuff is in here. But the more things that you know, the more answers you have to these questions, the better off you're going to be. So 10 steps for creating an effective creative brief. Well, actually, sorry. The one thing I wanted to show you first is that I also gave you this, which is kind of like hopefully a diagram of how like the whole thing works. So if we don't end up getting to it, just, for those people who like visuals, just here's a graphic summary of the branding process to use as a guide. So you start with the design brief, also known as the creative brief, which we're going to go talk about in a minute. But, in basic terms, you conduct a questionnaire or an interview with the client to get the design brief. Research, again, what I just talked about, you need to know research focusing on the industry itself, the history, competitors, all those things that you need to know about. Reference, conduct research into logo designs that have been successful and current styles and trends that are related to the design brief, which like I said, I'll tell you in a minute. sketching and conceptualizing, which is what I showed you before too. Developing the logo design concepts around the brief and the research. So that's why you have to have the first, that's why there's this certain order to this. Reflections, really, you need to take breaks through the design process. It's an important thing to bring up. Not a lot of people think about. It allows your ideas to mature, it lets you get renewed enthusiasm, receive some feedback. You can take that feedback, see if you want to make some changes, where you want to go from there. Then, of course, after that, you're going to have some revisions. You're going to present it. And you wouldn't want, when you go to that part, you really want to make sure that you're, just selecting a few logos um, through that. And you get feedback and repeat until, the whole process is completed, which, depending on how big a deal or how big a company, could be long or short. All right, so let's go into what is it that you need to know about for design, brief. Why is it so important? It's like, well, here's, know the company profile. What is it that the company you're working for actually does? What is the company's market position? So how does the company's product service compare to their competitors? How are they unique or different? What is the company's current reputation? What communication techniques have been effective for their competitors? What is the company's current situation? Why are you doing this, right? What happened that created the need for what you are working on? Because this is not, by the way, just logos. This is for direction for whatever design you're creating. You really want this background information because the more you know, the easier it's going to be for you. Do they need work on their brand identity? Are they trying to change how they're perceived in the marketplace? What are their business objectives? What is it they want to achieve? If it's a sales brochure, like what points do they want to push? If it's a product design, what attributes do they want to convey? Who is the target market? Who are you trying to reach with your message? Because you're not designing for everybody. That would not be a good way to go. Are they currently being reached? Does the target market have any unique or unusual attributes? What is the brand's personality? What is the company's image in the marketplace? How do they want to be perceived? Create a list of adjectives that describe the image the company wants to project. It's a big help. We use that a lot. What is the budget for the project? How much does the company want to spend? You need to know budget to decide your design. Is it going to be black and white or color? 3-panel brochure, 48-page full color book. The scope of the project is just, knowing the scope of the project is just essential and the budget, so that you know whether or not you could afford to do something or not, or you certainly want to put in the time. I mentioned that before too. What is the schedule and the final deadline? What absolute targets must be met? When? What is the desired design medium? Is it a print piece? Are you doing packaging? Is it a website? Is it a poster? Is it a signage? Is it everything? What are your constraints? Are there any inflexible parameters the client is insisting on? Like, there's something that absolutely has to be in the logo. Like, let's say maybe it was the other one they insisted on having sheep in their logo or something. So why? Why would you need that? These are just some things for that. Design is increasing importance as a competitive differentiator. So it helps, like, the argument for why do we need design. Talking it through, it's just not enough. Written direction saves time and misunderstandings. The creation of a creative brief means that a project's business objective are defined at the start, and you're not just sort of playing guesswork as you go along. You'll have a summary of key corporate points to base your creative design on. If they answer all these things, you'll know where to start. All right, so we know the elements, we know the principles, we got our direction, now what? You're going to need a concept. Whatever graphic design project you're working on, having an overall concept for the project before you start is crucial. When you're just starting out, this might seem overwhelming, so let's just give an idea or so about how to approach this. You want to address needs. So the best way to start any graphic design project is at the beginning, with your client's needs. What exactly you're being asked to create and for what purpose? And as you begin thinking about what you're creating, ask your client the questions on the following slides. Which are these? How does the firm like to work? What is the corporate culture like? Who are your clients? Who is your competition? Who is your audience? What is its purpose? What is the deadline? What is your budget? Are there any restrictions you need to be mindful as you start sketching possible designs? The more you know, the easier it's going to be. So that's why you want a design brief. It's a clear statement of objectives for the project listed in order of priorities. It indicates how you plan to meet those objectives, and it includes a time frame in which each of these steps will be accomplished. Very, very important. It's a deadline-driven business. It explains in detail what the design steps are, as well as explain the approval and edit cycles, which are part of this whole overall process. Because there'll be, you won't just do something and it'll be like, okay, great, let's go with it. You're going to have changes. Even more fun is when you have a whole group and you get changes from everybody individually. That's fun. Direction. Even if you're clear about what you're designing and why, your plan also to be defined by the budget. So we talked about that. Same thing again. So finding out how much money you have to spend will shape what you end up with, or at least it should. So now I'm going to give you some inspiration, the 12 habits of highly successful designers. So if you can hopefully pick up some of these things, it's going to also make you a better designer. First of all, multitasking. If you work for a design firm, you're going to be working on 5 to 10 projects at once, depending on the size, sometimes more. Every situation is different. I'm not saying this definitely is going to be that way. I worked for one company where I had the same assignment for months. It was fascinating to me. I kept going, okay, so what else am I supposed to be doing? No, that's just it. I started in July. They gave me the deadline of Thanksgiving for something that I could accomplish in 2 weeks. So it's very, very interesting. Whereas at the morning news, when I worked there, obviously I had several projects a day, and I'll give you a couple of other things here about successful things, like one of them being prioritization, and that'll come up here. But you're going to have to keep up with what each client needs. You'll need to figure out how to solve their problems with your designs. That's what we're designing for. Solve their problems, get out their message, all those things. And you're going to need to do that as quickly as possible because you don't know what other assignment's going to be coming around the pike really quickly. Organization. So you need a system to keeping track of everything. Especially also if you're going to be a freelancer, you have to keep each client's records in a certain place. Whether you have an online filing system or a physical cabinet for their projects, invoices, releases, and other materials, whatever, you got to keep it. I'm not sure how many of you are into that, but I would think that some of you, that would be the goal, was to be a freelancer. So there's a couple of things about that. And if we don't go into it, we'll go into more details about that, including pricing. So a checklist method might be a good way to go. And there are several list apps that help you keep things, organized. There are apps for everything now. It's so much easier to be organized. Even me, because I got to tell you that is not my strong suit, unfortunately. I will be honest about that as well. So not organized. Can only draw stick figures. Starting to get the pieces of me together here. So prioritization. I said it. Determine what tasks are more important and should be done first, and then you do them. Time management. Plan a project before starting. Consider the problem at hand instead of just jumping in and moving things around the page. Probably to me one of the most valuable assets. There's nothing more important than time, and that's why let me just get off on one other little tangent here. Um, I don't believe in doing anything free for anybody. I don't care if it's the only person probably who I would is, you know, my mother, my niece. They're the only exceptions. After that, I don't care if it's my sister, anybody else. This is my time, so I don't, and of course, when you know that people know that you're in this business, they ask you for a lot of this stuff. I'm sure, those of you who have some of that experience have experienced that as well. Same thing like somebody is a hairstylist in the family and somebody's getting married, they're going to just ask them to do their hair and expect that to be free, and I don't believe that's any more fair. So you want to minimize distractions. So in a time of fakes, Facebook, texting, email, and more, you have to learn to filter and tune everything out so you can concentrate. Follow up. This is a toughie. But if you rely on people getting back to you, you're going to be very, very disappointed. People need to know that you want the work, but you don't want to hound them constantly or you'll turn them off. So you have to figure out that fine line of not looking desperate, just being professional. Work under pressure. This is a deadline-oriented business. Deadline means pressure to get things done. If you like pressure, a challenge, and problem solving, this is definitely the field for you. So just in case you want to know if you're on the right track, that's what that. Use social media less. What I'm saying about that is it's good to stay informed and you need to do this. And again, it's all about that, like I said, about the more you know and keeping current, knowing what kind of trends, what's going on around the world. That's also still going to help you as a better designer. I have a whole list of things about that too that hopefully we're going to get to. It's good to stay informed, but don't spend hours on articles and tweets. Set aside, give yourself a time limit, say like 30 minutes a day, so that you can focus on the more important things. Budget your money. This is especially true for freelancers. So this is really what I'm being really more specific, addressing here. Be practical. Spend money what you need, and it's your money again. No spell check. Spend your money, and spell check isn't everything. Spend your money on what you need, and don't spend it on things that you don't. So highly successful designers, any of the ones that I know with this, who are successful freelancers, are very, very practical with their money. Focus on the design, not the software. So you need Photoshop and Illustrator to help you create your designs, but you need to understand what good design is before you put them to use. And that was just fun. Network. I don't even have any writing for this. This is just going through the thing. Network, whether it's LinkedIn, meetups, going to like the special events like the design conferences, um, immensely helpful. Again, just the amount of things that you can learn. Designers as a group are very, very helpful, for the most part, very, very wanting to, mentor people, give advice, feedback, the whole thing. So, network. And I don't know why we go back to that. Did I go through that? All right. Talked about this. Again, I was saying about the, I mentioned that we're going to talk about this because of, and I'll figure out the poster for us to critique before to get sent to you for next time. But now that we know about the elements and the principles, this will help more for critiquing. So we need to learn that stuff first. So now you can learn how to give constructive criticism. because I don't really think it's very helpful to just sell somebody that's terrible. You it's really not helpful. It's not going to help you figure out where you have to go with your design. So I think it's very important to talk about how to critique. So the broad purpose of graphic design is visual communication, so a critique of graphic design would include an evaluation of both aesthetics and usefulness. Graphic design is never art for art's sake. There's always a purpose, so you ask yourself these questions when you're critiquing a piece. Does it sell a product or service? What's the specific message? Does it have a specific message? It's amazing. Is there a call to action? It's amazing how many times people leave this off. Does the tone of the ad suit the client? Going back to that same thing again about the Toys R Us logo, the goofy, using the childish font. You wouldn't do that for a corporation because it would not suit the tone. How does it make you feel? Just in general, like what's your gut feeling about it? And more. Effective graphic design communicates because the designer has imposed some kind of order and structure on the content based on the project's objective and context. So when your critique point out which specific designs, is anybody keeping track? Because now we're up to 3 typos, which were not put in there on purpose. So it really bugs me because I am actually a proofreader, so this should be very, very embarrassing. Which design principles were used by the designers, how they work, why they're appropriate or not. Also decide if any design elements used are unnecessary or inappropriate. The most effective design uses only essential elements and no others. So again, the other big theme that we've been talking about through this whole thing is as simple as you can make it to get the point across. People like that. The simple use of visuals. Any of the stuff that I've had people like send me for things they liked over the years, mostly everyone has been that. It's had that element of simplicity, but being very, very effective at the same time. So can you suggest elements to use? Is the color scheme appropriate? Because again, we've been talking about that. Now, is the font appropriate? Look at the differences in the font. If you remember, I know I went through it fairly quickly, but for that Tavern on the Green, they went through several fonts in that till they came to the right one. And it's like you don't really think it's a big deal until you start putting them down. You realize that there is emotion and mood associated with typography and the way it's used. So again, is it full of crap? So we're going back to that. And there's a contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. So this is pretty cool. I have these in here too. And I'm going to go out and go to this before I go on to the 10 design commandments. Because I want to show you this. There is a site, this one is specifically this forest. And they noticed that a lot of these sites are like that. They like using that extra third, I don't know, maybe because the other ones are taken, consonant in their names. I've noticed that a lot. But this, designer of these business cards, he's looking for feedback on his brand identity work for a project management company that is ethics driven, goal oriented, and environmentally conscious, and it's called Green Feet. So you can see, obviously he's chosen the green color, and he's got this, he created the logo that they really like, and now he's trying to get the rest of the identity package together, and he's looking for some feedback. So just give you one through that too. And actually, I didn't pretend that we'll do that. And this is to developers and designers. Improve their craft through design feedback. So when you're starting out and starting to do stuff, you can sign up in this thing and get through it. It's interesting though. You can sign up for it, but it's like somebody has to like vote you in. It's kind of thing for you to actually become the forester. I think you can be a scout by going through. So you still would be able to submit stuff. But you can just see, here's the thing, designed for a Mac app, unbox as a project that me and a friend from university will be working on in coming months, blah, blah, blah. But, so these are people looking for, feedback on their different projects. It's kind of an interesting thing. The other one is like that as well, the dribble. So worth checking out. These links will actually work in the PDF form of this presentation. Okay, good. We just have enough time to do this last thing, which are the 10 design commandments. Credit to this webdesigndevelopment.com. It's really, really good practical stuff. So, thou shalt have no end to learning. There'll always be new techniques, new software, and constant changing industry trends. I'm not saying you have to keep in track of everything, but go through it. The other thing is, it's not enough to just look at and read through like tutorials. You got to start doing them. Because I'm going to bring this up probably again as well, but the number one thing you can do to be successful, this is the key to it all here, is practice. Nothing is going to make you better than practicing stuff. So going out there, finding things through, it might not be good at first. I guarantee you're going to get better if you practice. Join design communities, attend design conferences and meetup groups. These are all the things that I've said, which I've said even before I found this thing, by the way. Follow design blogs and design professionals. Post your work online for feedback. So I gave you some ideas for that. And there are plenty others. There's Behance also. Behance. Also a place where people are putting up portfolios, where you can actually find talent to do things, to work on projects. So very, very interesting community that's coming out in that. Also related, it's something I believe you get a free site with the whole Adobe cloud membership as well. Thou shalt not use any pixelated or stretched image like my friend here on the corner. You want to use the highest quality images possible. Blurry or pixelated images will ruin your design. So understand resolution and image sizes. So if you need to, go back on last week's where we went over that. And we'll go over it again in the review next week. But do not stretch your images. There's actually a deal where I think you can do like 5% or 10% or something and get away with it, but that's about it. Something that's a little less imperceptible. Thou shalt not take the name of the client in vain. As a designer, you're always going to be working for someone else. So you want to make sure you listen carefully to what the client wants and what the client needs. You need to learn to work within the client's specifications and budget constraints. So unless you can sign your own paycheck, check your ego at the door. Remember the deadline and keep it holy. So working within deadlines is essential for any successful designer. Be realistic. Don't say you can deliver something in a time frame if you can't. Which also brings up the fact that sometimes you're going to have to say no. And that's probably one of the hardest things to say as a designer. Being able to meet deadlines shows you can manage your time and that you're respectful of a client or agency's time. If you can establish yourself as trustworthy and can work within multiple deadlines, you will likely advance in your career. And yeah, even if I did not, well, actually, no, I did honor spell check. I did not honor proofreading. We should add that, but that'll come into play as well. But honor thy spell check. So good verbal and written skills are essential. Use spell check religiously. I was reading something today about somebody who said they would never hire anybody who uses poor grammar. So there's just, it could actually make a difference. Have someone else check your work. Can't stress that enough. So I'm really good at seeing stuff in other people's stuff, but not as good in my own. And I've always been that way. So double check the spelling of names and places. And do not rely on your client proofing it before it goes out into the world. I've seen some really big mistakes happen even with that. And it's still going to come back to you, even if they did sign off on the proof. So, thou shalt not overkill. What does that mean? Don't show everything you know in one project. As exciting as it is when I was talking about doing some of those tutorials, you know, show restraint, showing restraint and an editing eye is truly a mark of a great designer. Pick one part of your design to stand out. So again, we're talking about that whole dominant, feature, um, contrast, hierarchy, all those terms about that. One truly interesting element is all you need to create for a design to be memorable. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Stop cheating on programs with others. So use the appropriate programs for the appropriate project. That's why we talk about the fact that there are so many of them. I mean, that you need all of them. Don't use Photoshop to design a 12-page booklet or to design a logo. Don't be afraid to work outside your preferred program to gain the best results for the project. That's another thing I found, that people get very comfortable within one program and are very hesitant to use another one, even if it might be the better one to use. So, really important one, thou shalt not steal or copy. So feel free to be inspired, and everybody does that. You can look to history and you look to other designs for direction, but you don't want to actually outright steal someone else's design. Thou shalt not bear false qualifications or expectations to your audience. If you don't know how to do something, don't lie and say that you can. Lying or exaggerating to get a job will always come back to haunt you. And this commandment also includes giving clients unrealistic expectations. Don't downplay your talents or abilities, just keep it rooted in reality. I know why people hate these fonts so much, but thou shalt not covet overused fonts. When choosing any font, the first rule should always be readability. These are considered the top offenders of things that people seem to be. I mean, there's a whole book about thou shalt not use Comic Sans for some reason, that most hated of ones. So don't use any fonts associated with a big brand. People look at your design and associate with another brand, and you failed in that design. So getting back to the branding. And do I have time for that? Yeah, I guess I have a few minutes. Unless somebody has questions. If not, I'd be happy to go over some career advice suggestions as well. It's 8:29 already. So again, a lot of the same thing, but it's, and this will be in here if I don't get through all of them, but you got to continue to learn. Don't let your skills stagnate by saying no to further learning. Don't limit yourself to one specific skill set. Be a jack of all trades, but I say that, but you also need to really, that really can be overwhelming, and I don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed. So you'll end up hopefully finding something that, is more of your niche thing, and you could be going through that too. I don't know if I mentioned that or not in this thing, but I had an interesting thing when I was out there. I thought that my biggest selling point was the fact that I did know how to do a lot of different things. That didn't work for me as well as when I said, you know what, I'm an InDesign specialist. I opened a lot more doors that way by having that specific thing versus saying, yeah, I could do everything. For some reason, that was just not, you would think it would be a good thing. It really wasn't. Oops. So theory is easy, practice is not. Whatever you learn in the books, it doesn't always apply in real life. Your talent is more essential than the degree. So again, you could be self-taught. That's one of the great things about this. You'll hopefully get the foundation from this course. I'm not, this is not my ending, because next week we still have more stuff to go through together, but, just that idea. So you just got to, realize that, there's a whole other world out there for that. Again, I have to go up with this again. Socialize, networking, and social media for graphic designers is extremely imperative. Maintain contacts. frequently visit the graphic design related seminars that build contacts with creative veterans over there. And there's the other thing, and if we brought it up too, you do, if you are the smartest person in the room, no matter who you are, you're in the wrong room because you can always learn from people who are more than you. Build a portfolio. You can start playing with stuff like if you go to things like 99 Designs, crowdsourcing sites, if you want to get some practice, there's projects that they put out there for people to, design their logo or design something. The only thing about it is, obviously you'll be investing the time. They only pay for the design that wins. But I find it's a good size of practice. Gives you some ideas, because sometimes you don't know what to go through, but redesign something that you think was for, you can do that. If you know people, in your family, you have like a business that you can do stuff for, when you're starting out, whatever you need to do to start creating some items. So think quality over quantity with this, and we'll go into this a little bit more. Give a clear direction about the portfolio. Share a backstory. It's kind of cool. Keep it simple, stupid, in case you don't know. And keep your folio fresh. We actually only have a few more, so let's go quick. So again, what I was saying before, there'll be a jack of all trades and a master of one. It's good to have some of the development skills. It really does help a lot. Don't lose faith in your abilities. You'll encounter scores of people who criticize just for the sake of it. When you enter the creative world, you're surrounded by people who are more experienced than you. Don't get discouraged that you don't know much, and be confident in whatever you know. And that's a really tough one, but I can't stress that enough. There's always going to be people like, I spent a lot of time thinking about people who are better, and then you got to realize that you need to really concentrate on your own strengths. And make your personality attractive. This counts for a lot. It's really a big part of the whole ball game out there, because it's going to be what differentiates you. And again, I tell you, keep current. And that's it. So sorry, went a few minutes over. I believe so, because I actually don't do anything with the final exam. And the thing is, you guys are going to go through all the other classes, right? And then you come back to me in April. So can't remember what it is, but it is on there, I think, about that. I just think it's really cool that you guys are going to go together as a group. We don't have for this section, like next week, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what happens with the test for that, but I believe there is one. I will be reviewing next week all the things that will be in the test. You'll have hints because it will be covered in whatever I review, just so you know. So nobody has to really stress about that. Even though I don't administer the test, I know it's in it. Let me show you that. What is this thing? I don't need this anymore, right? So let's just go to let our community of 258,795 designers create dozens of designs for you. It's a great deal for people who are, need something done, isn't it? So you can see how it works here. But they'll put out stuff like there'll be different projects, and this is geared towards the client, but going through. Oh, okay. Wow, November 12th. Yeah, that's like, so that's pretty much a week, I guess, after this ends, right? Sort of. Because we're done next week, which is November or something. So it'll be a few days after that. But that'll be good, because hopefully it'll all stay fresh in your mind before you take the test. So anyway, you can see what this is. So this is something that people can also put out there if they wanted, but receive dozens of design, pick your favorite design, and then what ends up happening is whoever wins, so to speak, whatever the client ends up going with, they go through it. So it tells you all this thing here, how it works. And look, here's the thing about build a design brief so that you can give the information that we're talking about. So you can see why it's pretty important. And again, this is geared towards it. So relist your design contest in a marketplace for a community of more than whatever designers see. Professionals creative will read your brief and begin to brainstorm ideas just for you. So very clever. So this is what's called crowdsourcing. That's it. So think about that, and think about anything else, like question-wise, also besides whatever. I'll give you hopefully the details on the. I need to find something for that, other assignment. And I'm not even sure, to be honest, what the assignment is for this week, if there is one. But apologize for doubling it up on you. But hopefully it'll be easier to do also with this information behind you. And yeah, so think about that. Any questions, anything else that you can think of, next week is the time that you have me to ask them. Or you can send it ahead of time so I can, throw it in here, whichever you want. And thanks. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it. I don't know. I really don't. Yeah, see you next week. I didn't know it was, I didn't know the exam was on one specific day. Bye.